Another class of assets are intangible assets. These are long-term assets that have been purchased. That's how they get on the books. So we have patents. That gives the company exclusive rights to a process, and you would debit patents and credit cash. Trademarks is the exclusive rights to a name, a brand name, a company logo, and also a URL now. And in fact, there was a group of people who had the foresight to take the URL names such as Coca-Cola.com and PepsiCo back before companies realized the commercial value of the internet. So when those companies wanted the URLs, they had to go and purchase it from those people that had that foresight, and they paid good money. Copyrights is the exclusive rights to artistic materials. Franchises is the fee you pay to be able to have the right to say open up a McDonald's and get all of the McDonald's corporation's know-how and basically how to be an entrepreneur for that store. And then there's goodwill. That's an unusual one. And again, all these are on the books because the company paid for them or purchased them. So let's talk about goodwill. What goodwill is basically it only gets on the books if you buy another company. So let's say there's this company A and you're company B. You're looking to buy company A, and you look at their financials and it has assets of 50, liabilities of 20, and shareholders equity of 30. Well, when you go to buy a company, the company A is not going to sell for 30,000 because it knows its assets they're at their cost, such as land's in here. So they'd get it revalued, or assessed and get appraised, and let's say this is what ends up happening. They have found their assets to really be worth 60. Their liabilities are usually their fair value anyway, so that at a minimum this company's worth 40,000. They call that the net identifiable assets. So in other words, it's your fair value of your assets minus your fair value of your liabilities. But what happens is companies will often be purchased for a lot more than, say, 40,000 or more than their net identifiable assets. And it might be because there's brand loyalty, or they have a good reputation, or well-trained workforce, or they've had great marketing or advertising efforts made in the past, good research and development, because remember, research and development is expensed along the way. So if you purchase a company, you can actually get it on your books as part of goodwill. So let's say you, company B, decide you're going to buy the company for 55,000. How is that recorded? Well, you're going to credit your cash for 55. You're going to get those net identifiable assets. In other words, you're going to get the 60,000 of the company A's assets. 20 of you have to take their liabilities, of course. And you'll see here that our assets have gone up by 5, but our liabilities have gone up by 20. So we're off by 15. That 15,000 is goodwill. You paid 15,000 more than the net identifiable assets, again because of various reasons such as reputation or the name, etc. Now, another type of asset is natural resources, and those are basically where you again purchase the rights to minerals or rights to some natural resource like timber. Now, all of these assets over time get expensed with a couple exceptions. Let's go through them. Land does not get written down. Okay, so it does not get expensed over its useful life. Plant and equipment, it gets what they call depreciated. They refer to the using of that asset as depreciation expense, and then the contra asset account is called accumulated depreciation. Companies can pick from the variety of methods, but once they pick a method for a particular type of long-term asset, they must be consistently using that method. Now, intangibles, there's two things with that. Amortization expense is what they call the expense, but it's really the same thing as depreciation. It's the using up of intangible assets, and the method is straight line. And typically what happens is you'll debit amortization expense, and then they'll credit the asset directly rather than have a contra asset account, though you could if you wanted as a company to have accumulated amortization. Now, goodwill is an unusual intangible asset in that it's not amortized. What the companies have to do is look at the goodwill at the end of the accounting period and say, is that, for instance, that 15,000 still worth 15,000? Well, let's say you paid 15 extra thousand because of the wonderful employees. Well, if they all quit because of the merger, then you would have what's called an impairment loss, and you'd have to write down the goodwill. And then lastly, natural resources, they get expensed as they are depleted, meaning as they're taken from the ground, or if as the timber is cut, and the expense is called depletion expense, and the credit would be to accumulated depletion, excuse me. The method used is activity method. So that's the different methods of the expensing of assets if they are expensed. Again, land and goodwill are treated differently. And that wraps up the intangible assets and natural resources.